For these ESQ paddles, I'll just start by saying I thought these two were pretty awesome and I really enjoyed testing them. With the new PaddleTek ESQs, you get wide body stability, great power and spin, and you leave behind Gen 3 foam concerns. These paddles are also ultra maneuverable and fast, matching swing weights to the ultralight foam-filled rhombus ripples, and on the maneuverability index, which is rated 1 to 100 plus, 1 being the quickest paddles and 100 plus being the slowest, both thickness options of the ESQs have index numbers that are certainly on the faster end, especially for power paddles. I do think there are a couple things you need to keep in mind that may make you think twice before buying these paddles, so let's get into it. To start things off, you can use the code PBMedicine10 or just use the link in the description below to take 10% off of these paddles between now and November 25th, at which time PaddleTek will stop offering discount codes. So if you do want a discount, now's the time, but after that, if you do decide to get one of the ESQs, buying through the link below still supports the channel and is greatly appreciated. Before getting into the good stuff, which there are plenty, let's take a look at one thing that may make you think hard before getting one of these. These bad boys are being launched at $250, which then drops down to $225 after the PB Medicine 10 discount code between now and November 25th. That puts it right in the same ballpark as other heavy hitters like the Rhombus R1 and R2 Ripples, the Mod TA15 Alpha, or the Engage Pursuit Pros. I do think this paddle makes a good argument for justifying that price, including a strong lifetime warranty, which really is super rare, and a high performance in pretty much every category, and you can also escape that big question mark of durability that honestly still does come with most Gen 3 paddles right now, but just know that these paddles are not going to be cheap. As far as what these paddles are and the changes that were made to create the ESQs, essentially they altered the dimensions of the Bantam Annalee Waters paddles to create a true wide body power paddle. These changes solve two of the complaints that I often hear about the Annalee Waters paddles, the first of which is the short handle, which has been lengthened to 5.5 inches from the previous 5.25 inches of the ALWs, and to the smaller sweet spot of the ALW paddles, which is now a bit bigger on the ESQ models. The ESQ models also both come in that 12.7 and 14.3 millimeter thickness options, and like the other Bantam TKOs and ALWs, these paddles are also not thermal-formed, but still hit very hard. So as hard as these paddles hit, this means there is a very, very little risk of core crushing or delamination, and these are likely to be paddles that last a long time. One thing I particularly love about both the ESQ thickness options is that they are very, very maneuverable with swing weights that are shockingly low and twist weights that push that elite 7.0 mark. And then, as mentioned before, on the maneuverability index, which calculates how overall quick a paddle should feel when playing and takes into account the swing weight, twist weight, gross weight, and balance point, one being the fastest paddles and 100 plus being the slowest, the 12.7mm ESQ got a very maneuverable 19.8, similar to the Neonic Flare Prime or the Rhombus Ripple R2.14, and the 14.3mm ESQ also got a very maneuverable rating of 28, similar to the 14mm Mach 2 Forza or the 14mm 𝐝𝐤𝐴 I did find one thing a little peculiar here, as even though the 12.7mm ESQ had a more maneuverable rating on the overall index calculation, it actually had a gross weight that was less than the thicker 14.3mm ESQ by 0.2 ounces. This led me to speculate that maybe they weren't using that perimeter edge weighting in the 14.3mm options like they were in the 12.7s, and maybe that's why the 12.7mm ones were more heavy. And I know they were making some adjustments to that system since some of the original batch of the Bantam TKO Christian Alshon models had some of those steel balls that were coming loose. So I just went ahead and took the edge guard off the 14.3mm option so I could see for myself. The website infographic indicates they use a, quote, carbon steel twist weight and balance system, and shows a little picture of a bar looking thing, which isn't super clear, but after removing the edge guard, you can see more clearly that they took some of this putty type stuff and filled in a couple of the holes around the edge, and it definitely didn't have those steel balls in it like some of the ones that may have came loose on the first runs of the Bantam TKOs did. I don't necessarily want to detract from how good these paddles are with this particular topic, but I will say that whatever I had in my head for the carbon steel weighted system, this probably wasn't it. There is a lot of similarity in the infographics of their various paddle models, so it's clear they probably just recycle and reuse them from paddle to paddle, so I'm not totally convinced this was an attempt to mislead customers, but I do at least think this certainly means they need to update and create a more accurate infographic at least. I didn't open the 12.7 and maybe that one has the steel balls in it and maybe that's why it's heavier. I don't really know. But what I do know is that it does actually seem like this perimeter edge weight system is working because these paddles do feel pretty stable and the added weight is likely a contributing factor to their increased power too. In terms of how they played, I honestly felt like they did pretty much everything really well, and I don't say that very often. I had forgotten how well most of the PaddleTek paddles did with spin until I pulled these out, and then I was pleasantly reminded of that with recorded RPMs right up there with the best paddles in my database and in the ultra high range. They were sort of right in between the TKO paddles and the Annalee water paddles in how they played, with power and pop just below the TKO models, but still very high and notable during gameplay. But compared to the TKO models, they did have a much better controllability profile. They did seem to have better plow-through power than the Annalee Waters paddles, probably because of that leverage that I could get from that longer handle, with the Annalee Waters paddles and the ESQ models having pretty comparable pop. The 14.3 version actually didn't surprise me much in how it played. It had a similar feel to the other PaddleTeks, which evade that more stiff feel that comes with most thermoform paddles, and had good plow-through power with the 14.7mm thickness. The 12.7mm option, however, did pleasantly surprise me and is actually my favorite of these two options. I really didn't like the previous Christian Alshon 12.7mm TKO-C X specifically because it seemed like it was pretty unstable and it twisted a lot in my hand, but this 12.7 ESQ was surprisingly stable for a thinner paddle and actually felt a bit more consistent than the 14.3 ESQ version with less face compression and a more crisp pop. These are definitely solid wide body power paddles with strong pop, so if you're a person who struggles with control, then maybe these paddles aren't the right choice for you. They're definitely more controllable than the Bantam TKOs or most Gen 3 paddles I've tested like the R1 and R2 Ripple, but certainly these paddles lean more power and pop heavy. In summary, I think these are super impressive paddles and they are now my go-to recommendation for a true wide body power paddle for people who don't want to mess with the durability question marks of Gen 3 paddles. And though I think they do justify their price pretty well, I do wish they were a little cheaper, so this may not be a good option for people who are looking for a more budget-friendly paddle or for people who want paddles that are more control-oriented. That's my take on the new PaddleTek ESQ paddles. I hope the review was helpful, and if it was, like always, hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll catch you here for the next one.